Hello and welcome to Ursonate with Lucia. Today I'm going to begin by playing a piece I've been working on for the past week or so. It's a tentative exploration of a form somewhere between the audio essay and sound collage, which I've been hoping to probe for a while. I'm going to play it in a minute. It's about 26 minutes long. But first of all, I have a little thing I'd like to read out beforehand. Adorno argues the Viennese school's pragmatism occurred as a consequence of the artist's entanglement with the production of artistic commodities. The atonal composer is a member of the systems of production, which are able to churn out neo-romantic kitsch by the means of a musical syntax. Their creative work is determined by the character of artistic production as commodity production. Confronted with this state of affairs, the composer has no choice but to recognize their activity as such, the production of an artistic commodity by the means of a programmatic syntax, the tonal system, classical harmony, and form. For the Viennese, the sonata. In recognizing this, the artist is able to make explicit such programs, by recognizing them as such, utilizing them as such, and consequently disentangling them from the phantasmic ideals with which they conceal their nature, beauty, art for art's sake. The composer negatively inscribes the possibilities for a freedom beyond these mechanisms by their revelation of them as such. What then of the mid-century avant-garde? They received a different music from the Viennese, one taken out of the concert hall and the bar, and gradually moved to the radio and the phonograph. In doing so, the significance of recording emerges for music, the recording being the means by which the commodity is furnished with a syntax, arrangement, mix, sonomatter, and a structure, song, record, hit. The advent of recording and reproductive capacities, since what truly is a reproduction of sound except a recording of it, changed the form of the musical artistic commodity once again. Confronted with this position, what option was offered to the composer? Once again, to realize and negatively inscribe upon their work these features of the music form. Thus, Schaeffer's isolation of the sound object, the recognition of recording as the production of sonomatter, rather than as of the abstract ideal of music. Is it not fitting that the Etudes de Brutes were played first on the radio, that some of the most radical music of the century was announced through one of its greatest tools of mass communication? Recognizing the contemporary form of music as the production of sonomatter, of course frees the possibility of a fully controlled and conceptualized construction of sonomatter. With Fourier, this became a possibility, and with the synthesizer, it became an actuality. Sonomatter was disenchanted even further, as its character as some discrete set of sine waves is made explicit. What then of our conjuncture? We exist still in the remit of recording, but now we have broken free of even the physical form of sonomatter. We have no electromagnetic tapes to slow, no more phonorecords to invert. We even find ourselves in a separate position to those of the early digital avant-garde, who recognized the structure of the digital phonorecord for what it was, and realized the possibility of its revelation and negative inscribing, through bit crushing, data bouncing, digital distortion. Ours is an audio world populated by phantoms. Through semi-autonomous screens and speakers, we are entered into an increasingly abstracted and decomposed reproduction of sound. Voices reach across the world in instants. Products announce themselves everywhere with the tones of synthesized voices. Sampledelia is popular culture. Soundbites are reproduced at a pace beyond comprehension. One day the advert for a Chinese chemical company, the next an infinite series of potentially useful sample bites. The song form is increasingly subsumed from its incarnation as file to that of adornment. Clip. Sound. What follows is my attempt to engage with this proposal for an analysis of our present conjecture.
Our music's failure to articulate itself and its claim to futurity be resolved by a historicization of our music and its claims.
I am so happy to hear
music with symptomatic hysteria.
I am so happy to hear
Could our music's failure to articulate itself and its claim to futurity be resolved by a hystericization of our music and its claims? A music of symptomatic hysteria. What can a new music be? Post-human techniques, intimate machine beings, a weaponized alienation. There is no 20th century music without such cyborg futurism. Is such a music fit for our purposes? Is such a music fit for our purposes? Is such a music fit for our purposes? Or is it doomed to remain in the remit of academicians and hipster sound design cultists? The remit of the remit of the remit of
It's hard to separate these questions from those of politics.
Jameson and Adorno or Deleuze and Eschen?
Which way, Western man?
You are not censors but censors, not aesthetes but kinesthetes. You are sensationalists. You are the news mutants incubated in newspapers. Your mother, your first sound. The bedroom, the party, the dance floor, the rave. These are the labs where the 21st C nervous systems assemble themselves, matrices of the future of machinic. Discontinuum.
Mechanography, an omnidirectional exploration into mechano-informatics, the secret life of machines which opens up the vast and previously unsuspected coevolution of machines and humans in late 20th C Black Atlantic futurism.
We are all alienated, but have we ever been otherwise? It is through and not despite our alienated condition that we can free ourselves from the knot of immediacy.
Anyone who's been deemed unnatural, in the face of reigning biological norms, anyone who's experienced injustices wrought in the name of natural order, will realize that the glorification of nature has nothing to offer us.
It's hard to separate these questions from those of politics.
Fire from heat.
It's hard to separate these questions from those of politics.
Fire from heat.
It's hard to separate
these questions from
Fire from heat. Okay, from fire from heat. From fire from heat. Fire from heat. From fire heat. Fire from fire heat. Fire from fire fire heat. From fire heat. Fire from fire from heat. From fire from fire heat. From fire heat. From fire heat. Fire from fire heat. Fire from fire from fire heat. Fire from fire from fire from heat. From fire heat. From fire heat. From fire from fire from fire heat. Fire from fire heat. From fire heat. Fire from heat. From fire from heat. Okay. From fire from heat. From fire from fire from fire from fire from fire from heat. Okay. From heat. From fire from fire from heat. From heat. From fire heat. Fire from fire heat. Fire from fire from fire heat. Okay. Fire from fire. Okay. Fire from heat. Fire from fire from heat. From fire from heat. Fire from heat. From fire from fire heat. From fire heat. Fire from fire from fire heat. Okay. Fire from fire from heat.
It's hard to separate these questions from those of politics.
We have no compassion and we ask no compassion from you. When our turn comes, we shall not make excuses for the terror. We have no compassion and we ask no compassion from you. When our turn comes, we shall not make excuses for the terror. The disciplinary grid of gender is in no small part an attempt to mend that shattered foundation, and tame the lives that escaped it. The time has now come to tear down this shrine entirely, and not bow down before it in a piteous apology for what little autonomy has been won.
In affirming a future untethered to the repetition of the present, we militate for ampliative capacities, the spaces of freedom with a richer geometry than the iron, the assembly line, and the tree. We leave new affordances of perception and action unblinkered by naturalized identities. In the name of feminism, nature shall no longer be a refuge of injustice, or a basis for any political justification whatsoever. If nature is unjust, change nature.
Come. You're listening to Ursonate with Lucia.
Come.
Difficult music for difficult people.
Every track ambushes you, confounds the process of pattern cognition by leaving the expected beat implied. By opening holes at the tightest moments of the groove, pulse falls through subtracted space, polyrhythm wrong foots you, tugs and pushes at expectation, yanks the floorboards from underneath you. Echo turns the beat from a localized impact into an environment with you inside. Refractions bounce back from any surface. Initially the snare hits a stretched drumskin, the pedal depresses air between two cymbals so it hisses. Pneumatic metal pressure. Now the impact that run away from your hearing rebounds back at you from the wall, the ceiling, the floor. The world turns into a giant drum with you at its center. Beats ricochet off 360 feet, curving around the walls of the world.
Can you be something?
Irony survivor.
Which way, Western man?
What do you think of the relationship between the precise event that constitutes the concert and pre-written music or improvised music? Do you think that pre-written music prevents the event from taking place? Of improvisation verges upon reading, since what we often understand by improvisation is the creation of something new, yet something which doesn't exclude the pre-written framework that makes it possible. Perhaps you will agree with me on the fact that the very concept of improvisation verges upon reading. What about listening?
So you hear how there's something very dark about that.
It's hard to separate these questions from those of politics.
Such a music fit for our purposes? Or is such a music fit for our purposes? Or is it doomed to remain in the remit of academicians and hipster sound design cultists? Academicians and hipster sound design cultists. Academicians and hipster sound design cultists. Academicians and hipster sound design cultists. Academicians and hipster sound design cultists.
Since Montaigne, the best essays have been, as the French word suggests, trials, attempts. They entail the writer struggling toward greater knowledge through sustained research, painful introspection, and provocative inquiry. and they allow the reader to walk away with a freeing sense of the possibilities of life, the sensation that one can think more deeply and more bravely, that there is more outside one's experience than one has thought, and perhaps more
Since
within
Montaigne,
it, too. The best essays have been, as the French word suggests, trials, attempts. They entail the writer struggling toward greater knowledge through sustained research, painful introspection, and provocative inquiry. And they allow the reader to walk away with a freeing sense of the possibilities of life, the sensation that one can think more deeply and more bravely, that there is more outside one's experience than one has thought, and perhaps more within it, too.
Where there is nothing to interpret. Technician or dreamer, those are the alternatives. The person who interprets instead of unquestioningly accepting and categorizing is slapped with the charge of intellectualizing as if with a yellow star. His misled and decadent intelligence is said to subtleize and project meaning where there is nothing to interpret. Technician or dreamer, those are the alternatives.
The criteria of this process.
Nothing can be interpreted out of a work without at the same time being interpreted into it. The criteria of this process are the compatibility of the interpretation with the text and with itself and its power to release the object's expression in the unity of its elements. The essay thereby acquires an aesthetic autonomy that is easily criticized as simply borrowed from art, though it distinguishes itself from art through its conceptual character and its claim to truth free from aesthetic semblance.
Nothing can be interpreted out of a work without at the same time being interpreted into it. The criteria of this process are the compatibility of the interpretation with the text and with itself and its power to release the object's expression in the unity of its elements. The essay thereby acquires an aesthetic autonomy that is easily criticized as simply borrowed from art, though it distinguishes itself from art through its conceptual character and its claim to truth free from aesthetic semblance.
When philosophy supposes that by borrowing from art it can do away with objectifying thought and its history with what is usually termed the antithesis of subject and object, and indeed expects that being itself would speak out of a poetic montage of Parmenides and Jungnickel, it only approximates a washed-out pseudo-culture. With peasant cunning legitimated as primordiality, it refuses to honor the obligation of conceptual thought to which it has subscribed as soon as it has employed concepts in statements and judgments.
Does not obey the rules of the game of organized science and theory that, following Spinoza's principle, the order of things is identical with that of ideas. Since the airtight order of concepts is not identical with existence, the essay does not strive for closed, deductive or inductive, construction. It revolts above all against the doctrine, deeply rooted since Plato, that the changing and ephemeral is unworthy of philosophy, against that ancient injustice toward the transitory, by which it is once more anathematized, conceptually. The essay shies away from the violence of dogma, from the notion that the result of abstraction, the temporally invariable concept indifferent to the individual phenomenon grasped by it, deserves ontological dignity.
The traditional concept of method. Thought acquires its depth from penetrating deeply into a matter, not from referring it back to something else. In this the essay becomes polemical by treating what is normally held to be derived, without however pursuing its ultimate derivation. The essay freely associates what can be found associated in the freely chosen object. It does not insist stubbornly on a realm transcending all mediations, they are the historical
historical ones in which the whole of society is sedimented, rather the essay seeks truth contents as being historical in themselves. It does not concern itself with any supposed primeval condition in order to contravene society's false sociality, which, just because it tolerates nothing not stamped by it, ultimately tolerates nothing indicative of its own omnipresence, necessarily cites, as its ideological complement, that nature which its own praxis eliminates. The essay silently abandons the illusion that thought can break out of pieces into vices, out of culture into nature. Spellbound by what is fixed and admittedly deduced by artifacts, the essay honors nature by confirming that it no longer exists for human beings. The essay's Alexandrianism replies to the fact that by their very existence the lion and the nightingale, wherever the universal net allows them to survive, only want to delude us that life still lives. The essay abandons the main road to the origins, the road leading to the most derivative, to being, the ideology that simply doubles that which already exists. At the same time, the essay does not allow the idea of immediacy, postulated by the very concept of mediation, to disappear entirely. All levels of the mediated are immediate to the essay, before its reflection begins.
It is not so much that the essay ignores indisputable certainty as that it abrogates the ideal. Just as such learning remains exposed to error, so does the essay as form. It must pay for its affinity with open intellectual experience. Just as such learning remains exposed to error, so does the essay as form. It must pay for its affinity with open intellectual experience by the lack of security, a lack which the norm of established thought fears like death. It is not so much that the essay ignores indisputable certainty as that it abrogates the ideal. Just as such learning remains exposed to error, so does the essay as form. Just as such learning remains exposed to error, so does the essay as form. It must pay for its affinity with open intellectual experience by the lack of security, a lack which the norm of established thought fears like death. It is not so much that the essay ignores indisputable certainty as that it abrogates the ideal.
Can it be argued that the interest of critical writing lies almost entirely in its method? Can it be held that the content of any given evaluative statement, this is good, important, this is bad, trivial, is not what serious criticism is, seriously read for, but rather that such criticism is understood through the forms of its arguments, through the way that its method, in the process of constituting the object of criticism, exposes to view those choices that precede and predetermine any act of judgment.
Can it be argued that the interest of creative work lies almost entirely in its method? Can it be held that the content of any given evaluative statement, this is good, important, this is bad, trivial, is not what serious criticism or understanding of such work is, seriously, but rather, that such creative work is understood through the forms of its arguments, through the way that its method, in the process of constituting the object of creative work, exposes to view those choices that precede and predetermine any act of creative work?
How do you know if the experiment has failed? Assuming you wish for us to take seriously your claim to creation of an experimental music. Even if you are not willing to perform a criticism of your work on the very terms by which it justifies and constitutes itself as a work of experimental music, you must recognize the necessity and possibility of such criticism as being the very stakes
even if you are not willing to
experimental
perform a
music
criticism
may
of
even
your
exist.
work on the very terms by which it justifies and constitutes itself as a work of experimental music, you must recognize the necessity and possibility of such criticism as being the very stakes by which an experimental music may even exist.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of
Experimental music.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of
Experimental music.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of
Experimental music.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of
Experimental music.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of
Experimental music.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of
Experimental music.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of
Of course, we must not take the need to reinvigorate a culture of critique as the basis for taking less risks, putting less on the line. A musical quietism is a drastic failure of imagination. Now more than ever, we need an open culture of criticism and risk. We must be willing to put our necks on the line for music. We must be prepared to substantively discuss our work, to embrace criticism openly, to encourage frequent and serious discussion of the political dimensions of our aesthetics. Experimental and electronic musics are increasingly marginal, obscurantist, and lacking in any contribution to our political projects. But it doesn't have to be like this. A genuine renewal of public intellectual culture is possible, and it's worth fighting for. New publics, new manifestations, and multiplicities of social being need new musics. Why do we hesitate in our ambitions to create these? Next time you go to a show, ask yourself if you truly feel comfortable critiquing the music. Why not? Is that healthy? When's the last time you felt critical about the political dimensions of sonic aesthetics? Can you articulate why you hold the aesthetic preferences you do? Birthing a culture of radical experimental music begins at home, and it begins with us all.
When someone talks about self-conscious specialization of modern artists, or when some Philistine rants against the ideal of l'art pour l'art, an ideal that supposedly always coincides with decadence and degeneration and other nefarious things, what he means is nothing but the alienation of production from consumption. The nowadays completely radical reification of all art, which removes it from immediate use and hence from immediate comprehensibility. The prevailing critique of this state of affairs usually presumes an isolated aberration and is correctable by means of a so-called recovery that is supposed to have something to do with some shortcomings in the psychic makeup of modern artists, who are said to be rootless and alienated from nature. What is important, however, is, first, to acknowledge the necessary character of the situation itself, to grasp the fact that the roots nowhere reach deeper into the situation than in the case of so-called rootlessness. The reification of art is the result of a socio-economic development that transforms all goods into consumer goods, makes them abstractly exchangeable, and has therefore torn them asunder from the immediacy of use. To describe how this alienation came about would nothing less than to sketch the history of our society. At a minimum, however, the enforced character of the situation can be seen in the fact that it scoffs at any correction coming from art, precisely because art is socially produced. They wither up even without being expressly attacked. If art is unable to recapture the lost character of immediacy, it is a result not of general cultural philosophical awareness which, ultimately, could always be contradicted by reality, but of the genesis of the production problems in art itself. For the process of differentiation, the progressive difficulty of artistic solutions, does not come from the private intellectual state of mind of individual artists, nor does the social situation express itself mystically in the incomprehensibility of the work of art. Rather, technical differentiation, and with it the increase in difficulty, derives from the rationalization of the process of artistic production, namely from the fact that the artist, robbed of all prescribed norms, has to ask with every measure that he writes, every square centimeter of paint that he applies, whether is right in just this way and just this spot. But the answer to this ceaseless questioning in the material, and quite independent of the intellectual and emotional state of mind of the artist, is coterminous with differentiation, and thus with increased difficulty.
This is not, however, to suggest that the artist does nothing. The artist can make a conscious choice to present false images of reconciliation and immediacy, can choose not to develop the materials inherited to them in their medium. Inasmuch as we are trapped by our condition and the general crises of subjectivity. It is not, however, that there is nothing we can do. We must expunge the ghosts of immediacy, the relics of bourgeois decadence, and reconcile illusions. Say no to invocations of natural beauty, talent, and the harmonic systems of high European decadence. Embrace difficulty, embrace atonality, embrace arrhythmia. The future cannot wait. We must strive for a compromised utopianism, a compromised reconstruction of collective agency. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world. In banging our heads against the wall, we will eventually indent a mark of the profound wrongness of the world.
Are you still a humanist? Why? Let me rephrase that. Are you still a humanist? How? Is it not clear how we have already always been post-human? What do you hope to accomplish with your kitsch humanist platitudes? Reconciliation? Repair? Do you sincerely believe the world leaves space for a humanism, or do you long for a return? A return to what though? Return is as impossible as it is evil. Humanism serves now more than ever to deny the realities of the world, to present false images of reconciliation, to engender bourgeois projects of reconstruction. There is no space left in the world for the human. At least by the human's absence we may trace back the tools with which he was struck down. Against musical humanism, against any invocation of the creative spirit, of the subjective act of expression, against the lame ghosts of the humanist spectre. There is no music of the future which preserves the human. There is no music of the future which preserves the human. There is no music of the future which preserves the human.
So, yeah, as I say, that was something of a first crack at a form. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it somewhat interesting. I'd really like to hear some feedback on this, because it's very much a punt, it's very much a speculation. But I've wanted to make something in that vein for a while, and the last week or so I put that together. I think that was quite a good statement of what I try to do with this show generally. I'm going to now play some music. And I hope to do more sound colleges like that in the future. Thank you. Sorry, I actually just feel the need to say something about this track. I am so enamored with this track. It's almost beyond belief. It's off TM, who is a London-based rapper's album that came out in January. It's one of the first albums to come out this year. First week of January came out, and I've noticed a few rap records going in this direction in the last 6 months or so. But this is by some way the purest statement of like complete electroacoustic decomposition and contemporary rap. I think like it's absolutely fantastic, and I really, really hope to hear more rap in this direction this year. Really, really incredible. The whole album's worth a look. It's the most abstract rap I've heard in quite a while, but absolutely by no way disenchants the
Get up out the way, Tom, get up out the room. Walk up in a party with that motherfucking broom. Tell this bitch to get up off me, I got better shit to do. Count up these blues, count up this money, this shit give me blues clues. People walk up to me like, bro, I know you. Once you heard about me, man, that shit is old news. Yeah, you know me, but I don't know you. You gon' have to put me on about what you do. I didn't grow very tall, but I'm higher than you. Make a nigga fall like the Twin Towers did. Tryna get rich, tryna get money quick. Coulda upped it on your mans, but I felt bad for him. Yeah, that boy smoking block work, smoking dog shit. Bitch, I'm climbing through the ranks till I'm fucking kingpin. Bitch, I'm bullying with the ranks, boy, you cannot get it. Bitch, I'm bullying with the ranks, boy, you cannot get it. Bitch, I'm bullying with the ranks, boy, you cannot get it. Bitch, I'm bullying with the ranks, boy, you cannot get it.
کبوتری که از دهان تو آب میخورد بر شانه من کبوتری که گلوی مرا تازه میکند
Habt keine Angst. Wir kommen sowieso alle in die Hölle. Es ist wahr. Alle Süchtigen landen in der Hölle.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. When I lay my burden down, glory, glory, hallelujah. When I lay my burden